Hi, it's time for another edition of At the Movies with JT and Tim. I love we're just aping that. We're just spitting on Ebert's grave.
I had completely forgotten about that, but I
That's
really enjoy it.
yeah. Why make up a new an original name? Anyway, today we are talking about the Wachowski sisters movies. There are 7 of them, and we have watched all of them, and they're all good. That's the video. Yeah, okay, so in order, they are Bound, The Matrix, The Matrix 2, The Matrix 3. Then I guess the next one would be Speed Racer, right?
Yeah.
And then Cloud Atlas, and then Jupiter Ascending.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so, yeah.
And we're not obviously talking about Sense 8.
Yeah, we
but
didn't
like
watch
I'm
that.
curious, curious enough.
Yeah, I would like to see it at some point, but this is about movies, so we're talking about the movies. So I guess both of us made ranked lists of the movies. Why don't we just start with that, and then just talk about them?
Number 1 is Speed Racer. Number 2 is The Matrix Reloaded. 3 is The Matrix. 4 Matrix Revolutions. Then 5 Cloud Atlas. 6 Bound, and then last is Jupiter Ascending for me. What about you?
Ours are very similar. I have The Matrix 1 as my number 1. I do really, really love Speed Racer, but I think Matrix is just very quintessential Wachowskis for me, and it's like I regard it as like a perfect film of its type. But Speed Racer and The Matrix are both 10 out of 10 movies for me. And then right behind that is Matrix Reloaded. I basically regard it as highly as the first movie, but just a little bit less. Then Cloud Atlas. I really enjoyed Cloud Atlas. Then Matrix Revolutions. Then Bound. Then Jupiter Ascending. But do not be fooled. Bound and Jupiter Ascending are both excellent movies as well.
Yeah, no, those are great movies. I think that it's just like it's hard when you have a catalog of all bangers like this to like even try and rank them, because I like all like the lowest Jupiter Ascending is still a 4-star movie for me. That's
too.
still a great flick. Like I don't know. I think their whole catalog is filled with amazing work, and I'm curious to see what they do next. I mean, especially since Matrix 4 is only one of them. It's Lana, right?
I think it is.
Doing
Yes.
4? Yeah.
Yeah, I agree, and I think it's funny. You can see the history of the reception of Wachowski movies, and it basically just tracks very directly with culture sucking more over time, because it was like the first Matrix came out in 99 and it just like blew people's dicks off, and it's a really good movie and people loved it, and that is appropriate. Speed Racer was like middling, Cloud Atlas very polarized, and then Jupiter Ascending, it seems to be consensus that it sucks.
I mean, there's like, I thankfully with Speed Racer, there's like been a broad critical reclaiming of it as like one of the most innovative like digital works, like of recent memory. And from there, I mean, I think they continue like a fascination with that. I just think that as they do more complex things, I mean, not to say, because it's like Jupiter Ascending, I feel like they're like kind of more creatively stifled, and I think
Yeah.
that like they're sort of being forced to work in like a more traditional framework, especially coming off of like Cloud Atlas, that is just like an amazing feat of cross-cutting
Yeah.
and just like parallel storytelling.
You can definitely sense a difference between Cloud Atlas and Jupiter Ascending in terms of their creative control, and Jupiter Ascending very much having to fit more neatly in a traditional 2010s blockbuster mold. A part of the reason Jupiter Ascending feels stifled to me is because there was meant to be more of it, and there won't be. And it very much feels that way. Not in the way that the narrative feels incomplete, but that you can sense that there are more things being referred to, that there's like a bigger idea going on.
I mean, Bound definitely to a lesser extent, but that is like not. I mean, it's unlike the rest of their films because it's not like science fiction.
Yeah, it's not a genre work. Obviously, a lot lower budget because it's their first movie.
But I mean, I still think it like really fits in like in a formally inventive way, and also like builds an impressive world there for being like a smaller indie movie.
Yeah,
like that still like has like there's the lesbian bar, there's like sort of a general mob scene. Like I think that's one really enticing and appealing aspect of all of their filmography is they really craft out like such unique universes filled with characters that are just I don't know, you get to like, I don't know, really live in it, all of it.
And Cloud Atlas, I think one of the reasons I loved Cloud Atlas so much is that it's like I think the biggest example of that, because I mean, it's across 6 different timelines, and we're kind of jumping around from film to film right now, but it's across 6 different timelines, and so and there's so many different like weird and colorful characters and like worlds beyond what is depicted that you get a sense of. And I think that is present in all of their movies, including Bound, something that's much more like stripped down. All of their like the very dynamic way that they shoot and edit scenes is all there in Bound.
A lot of times they get critically derided for having these like big themes and like being like emotional in that way and sort of like shooting for melodrama as opposed to like being plotty. But that's what I absolutely love about their filmography, because it's filled with like this sense of optimism and love that like begins with Bound. Like I mean, it's the romance and like risking this for each other is like such a key part of it. And then that echoes like, I mean, Neo and Trinity, like Cloud Atlas in general is like about like love across time, like Speed Racer, the love between a family. It's just something that like they're able to hit on with these big stories of emotional bond that are regardless of the scale of the story.
Even the latter 2 Matrix movies that still generally people have kind of muted opinions of, which I find very strange, because I think the Matrix trilogy is like about as good as it gets in terms of like recent blockbuster filmmaking.
There is such a huge mainstream like sci-fi spectacle that goes out of its way to ape Hong Kong movie like action style and is successful for that. And then also, I mean, more so in the later 2 movies, is so incredibly diverse and about like inclusion. I mean, that I think relates to like their obsession with like connectivity and love and things like that. But their filmography is very diverse in that respect, where it's like they're concerned about all different voices coming together in communal love.
Yeah, and in Cloud Atlas, they're so diverse, they have white people playing Asian people and Asian people playing white people, which is a little bit uncomfortable, but...
No, that is. It's like, it's uncomfortable. I mean, it's like, a lot of the racial stuff in Cloud Atlas is definitely weird in that respect, but I think I like what it's getting at,
Yeah, no,
and
I
like while
do
it
kind of
while
get it, and I'm not. Yeah,
while it is awkward and does feel kind of racist, it like is like the reason they're doing that is to, I think, get at that like in like these souls of characters who have changed and like transformed over time, and
mm-hmm.
it's like it leads you to believe like that some characters are like other versions reincarnated. I think it does something interesting with saying like we're all the same, like we're different but the same,
Mm-hmm.
but like in terms of like I don't know. That's what how the weird race stuff like plays in a way that I think is like pretty forgivable for me. While I may not be the best person to approach like viewing the films of the Wachowskis through a trans lens,
Mm.
I think Cloud Atlas is really meaningful in that respect of like a lot of movies that I see marked as very trans are like concerned with the notion of identity and like like discovering oneself in that respect. And I think Cloud Atlas and how the actors' performances like they personify beyond like race, gender, and like shift in that perspective. I think that is a really meaningful continuation of the Wachowskis showcasing transness on film.
Yeah, I think there's a very clear queer sort of through line in their filmography. I think the Matrix movies can very much be read that way. Bound, very obviously.
Yeah.
Cloud Atlas, like you said, even Jupiter Ascending to some degree. They should make a Cloud Atlas video game, the Wachowskis. I think it would make a really good video game. I think you should. Each of the timelines is like a different genre of game, like a different kind of game, and you can just switch back and forth between them at your leisure. I imagine the like 2300s timeline would be like a Witcher game, like an action RPG type deal.
Saying that one of their movies should be adapted to a video game is like perfect because I think like in their understanding of digital cinema and like pushing a way forward for movies, they're like some of the people who have used CGI and digital effects in the most meaningful and compelling ways and unique explorations. And I think that like people who are often like pioneers like that will be like rejected to some extent by like the critical consensus of the time.
The main criticism for most of the Matrix, for most of the Wachowski movies, is that they're corny, and that they're weird. And first of all, weird is not a criticism of a movie. Being a weird movie is awesome. And corny, it turns out, just means emotionally sincere. I don't think people really know the difference. Because, I mean, yeah, I guess I can, especially with something like Jupiter Ascending, I can see it being described as corny. I just don't automatically think that's a bad thing, I guess.
Well, I mean, I think they back up their melodrama with really epic stakes to it that like give way to I don't know being like flowery and poetic like that.
Yeah.
Like to compare like the Matrix and Cloud Atlas, it's like the Matrix. It's like mythical and like there's the whole like biblical angle of like Neo as like a Christ-like figure that will like save all of society, and it's like that's a story that is like grand in scope and huge. And like Cloud Atlas as well is like about like spans decades and like an insane amount of time with hundreds of different people. And it's just if I don't know what kind of like stories you could tell that aren't grand and emotional scale to match that.
Yeah.
Like it just I don't know, they set up such interesting like plots with high stakes, and I think it's only necessary to make the action like meaning. Like I think the best action movies are oftentimes like insanely melodramatic, and like
Yeah.
their dramatic scenes are as high stakes as the action scenes, and it just has to be that way. And I think the Wachowskis understand that, and that's why their films are like operatic and emotional, and like for like fucking bozo film critics like want to read that as corny, but it's just I don't know. It's an intensely beautiful style.
I never, in watching these movies, I've never found the emotion to be unearned. Like you said, I mean, they match the scope and the scale of the stories being told and the visuals you're seeing. I mean, like Speed Racer, I think that movie gets to be quote unquote corny because I mean, especially in the latter like half or latter third and just the final sequence, it's like rapturous visuals.
Jupiter Ascending, I think, like are both our least favorite. Like what really like for me, I think like the plot to that movie is like kind of like clunky and like follows like a very like I don't know, like traditional path.
Yeah.
But a reason I'm able to like I don't know to see beyond that is because the rest of what fills in the pieces of that movie are so spectacular.
Yeah.
Like the action sequences in there, and like there is
Yeah.
like that. I mean, I would say not as heightened emotionally as the other
Except for Eddie
Wachowski
Redmayne.
films.
He was pretty heightened.
Yeah, yeah. But that is there in order to like it's enough to smooth past like other things that while be like, okay, what exactly is going on here in the plot with Jupiter Ascending? It's
Yeah.
not. I don't fucking need to know
Yeah.
to appreciate like a.
I've loved
kick-ass
movies
action
where I
scene.
had no idea what was going on many times.
Yeah.
It's not a requirement to think a movie is good. There are movies where I've fallen asleep in them for like 20 minutes. And I'm like, that was one of the best things I've ever seen.
Exactly. Yeah.
So you just need to stop being a fucking nerd about it.
I mean, to speak to The Matrix, like something I revisited last year, and I just recently watched the first Matrix, and I want to do it again to prepare for 4, and
Yeah.
hopefully there'll be a chance to see that one in theaters, but we'll see.
Hopefully.
But something like that, I think, highlights. With Cloud Atlas, I feel like it's like a weakness, like the way the Wachowskis incorporate, like, do cultural appropriation essentially. I think is interesting because it's like they're coming in with a very Western perspective on things, but blending that with the Hong Kong action movie
And with the Eastern thought sort of stuff
Yeah.
in Matrix.
Yeah, that stuff, it just like is because of the world of that being more different than the Earth of Cloud Atlas. I think it works a lot better, and
Yeah.
it winds up being this amazing cultural blend that is like I mean, aside from when a handful of Hong Kong action filmmakers have made movies in the United States, it is the closest the US will ever get to like crazy Hong Kong action.
It's the closest American made to a Hong Kong action movie.
And it's just fascinating to see that blending of cultures emerge.
Yeah.
And like also at the very start of like CGI technology, and you get such a beautiful spectacle that's just, I don't know, it's so visually impressive and just such a fun ride throughout.
I never
like
thought
also,
that the CG effects in Matrix 2 and 3, which are the ones that the CGI gets derided in a lot, I didn't think they were bad at all. I think for that, and that was also the charge against Speed Racer when it came out, is that it didn't look good. The visual effects weren't real or whatever. And I mean, with Speed Racer, that's an even dumber thing to say because that's a movie that is utilizing digital technology for like an extremely specific aesthetic purpose.
yeah, I mean, both movies are like not like they're not trying to be
No,
realistic
it's all
things.
very
And like,
heightened and
yeah,
hyper real.
they come at just the perfect time of like end of like 90s in like independent filmmaking boom stuff, and are able to take these unique and inclusive stories about like hope and love and blend that with
And transcendence.
yeah, and transcendence, and to blend that with the digital, I feel like leave you with some of the most overwhelmingly like hopeful and optimistic movies that I've ever seen before.
Yeah.
And it's just like they give you so much in terms of pure formal style and visual treat, and marry that with these feelings of optimism for the future, and just like I don't know, the way they muse on like a collective. It's I mean, that's something we didn't even touch throughout all of this, is just how anti-consumerist
Yeah.
all of their work is.
Yeah.
And it really shines in the Matrix series and Speed Racer. And it's just,
Yeah.
they give you so much to fucking chew on.
I mean, The Matrix is very obviously an extended metaphor for living in late 90s, early 2000s America, and, being a cog in a machine or what have you. And, of course, now, because of how ubiquitous The Matrix has become, and now the red pill has been, like, appropriated by conservatives and everything, now, of course, that sort of... it's kind of like how X-Files was very novel at the time, and now it's become kind of like the butt of a joke for people who... for, like, woke people who, think in those terms of, like, oh, I'm in the Matrix, or, this is some X-Files shit going on. And I understand that to some extent, because obviously these things were big cultural touchstones, and those got, subsumed into pop culture and became lame as fuck like everything else. But they were good. They're still good things, and especially with regard to Matrix, speak to something very true. And I think Matrix speaks to something, to a deep truth about anti-consumerism, anti-capitalism, and transcending all of that, in a way that is very specific to like the early internet age, the late 90s and early 2000s, but also in a very universal and timeless way about just more general human transcendence. It's just so nice and pure, and of course put together with just like fantastic spectacle and violence. Is amazing.
The Matrix, it certainly doesn't depict an optimistic vision of the future.
No.
But like I ultimately at the very end of it, like ending the war with the machines, I feel like has a sense of hopefulness to it. Cloud Atlas as well.
It also,
like,
again, just has a more general sense of, like, a belief in humanity. Even though the story itself is very dark and the situation is quite grim, even at the low points of those movies, there is still I always think of one of my favorite scenes from Matrix Reloaded, when they're under the city of Zion, and the crowd cheers after Morpheus says, "We're still here." It's that sort of thing, followed by that incredible dance and sex sequence, where it's
exactly.
you're just seeing people like having this like out of body joy and like touching each other and like just like very like animalistic human connection, to contrast with the rest of the movie where we're going to be fighting like huge machines and computer programs in very sterile environments. And
I mean, I think that like what is perfect, it's like the reason why their anti-consumerist and anti-capitalist bent merges so well. And I think oftentimes why it's called hokey is because like their approach to like fighting capitalism is like being radically anti-capitalist to the Wachowskis involves human compassion and love, and like caring about people, and also fucking too, but just like that, like the notion of love as being radically anti-capitalist, And like in a way it is. I mean, it feels very corny to say out loud,
But
but it's
it
just
is
like,
true in
yeah,
a
it is true. And
broad
like,
sense.
yeah, I don't know. And it's kind of sweet. Or, I mean, not is kind of. It is sweet to see that represented in a big budget movie for something that large, to be that subversive while also like just delivering on pure spectacle. That's why I love their filmography.
Obviously, we could talk about any one of these movies for a long time. The Matrix trilogy, it's on its own, warrants lots of discussion. And people who watch my videos at this point know how much I love Speed Racer. And I think we've done a good job kind of talking about the broader strokes of their filmography, the sort of general things formally and narratively to be found in them and why we like them. Yeah, the Wachowskis. Nobody's doing it quite like them. Bangers across the board. Nothing below 4 stars for either of us, I'm pretty sure.
Yeah, we should I'm excited to talk to you about Matrix 4. We
Yeah,
could
we
do a
should do a
thing
joint review
about
for
that.
that.
Yeah.
Also recommend Animatrix. I didn't watch it for this, but I did watch it recently, and it's very good. It's an anthology movie, so obviously it's like kind of hit or miss. There's some segments that are better than others, but the highs are very high.
Did the Wachowskis write all of them or
I think they wrote one of them at least,
okay.
but I know they were involved in various capacities with some of them. So, but it's still really neat. And some of them you do get a lot more sort of juicy lore. I don't. It's not. It's nowhere near as like brilliantly constructed or entertaining as their stuff, but it's a nice supplement. Should we say what our next one is going to be? We did announce this one at the end of the last video.
Fair enough. I mean,
I don't think we'll say the list, but I think we can say what it's going to be.
yeah, no. Before chatting about the Wachowskis, Tim and I had a very serious conversation
Oh, yes.
about what movies, mainstream movies for the most part, we felt were broadly representative of Bush era themes and culture.
Yeah.
And we made a little list of movies of all types that we're
Yes.
gonna.
I think it's a pretty
watch.
good variation of types of movies.
Yeah, no, I mean I've seen other Bush era lists and things, and it's like because it's a small list, we obviously left a lot out.
Sure.
But I think it will be a fun one. That one I think we can do more where we go film by film.
Yeah,
on
because
that
it's
one.
not so much. There's not a whole lot connecting them other than the very broad sort of thing that we came up with. But yeah, that would be more of a thing of going film to film. But I'm excited for that one. I'm not going to say what movies are in the lineup, but it's a good mix of genres, a good mix of perspectives, liberal, conservative, and so forth. And some that deal very directly with the politics of the time, and others that don't, are kind of just more representative of the broader culture of the 2000s. But I'm excited. I think it'll be pretty fun. So that'll be coming end of March, beginning of April time. But that's all for now. And JT, thanks as always for stopping by and chatting about movies. I'll see all you folks next time.